Greetings, dear friends. I know you are eager to start working with design. In this lesson, we have reached it and are starting the development of blocks specifically for Gutenberg. We will be working with the first blocks, probably starting with the header. Let's move to our code editor. And in the previous lesson, as far as I remember, we left off by returning to the main branch. Let's check this. We will run the command git in the terminal. Status. And yes, indeed, we are currently on the main branch. But I cannot start development and push changes to the main branch right now, as it's not quite correct. We should keep the main branch as a clean primary branch, because it is on this branch that data will be sent to the production server when releases are launched. Therefore, whether we work individually, always use separate branches for development. And as a rule, I divide this into blocks. That is, if I am developing the header, I create a separate branch for the header. If it's a hero block, I create a separate branch for the hero block. Upon completing work on the block, I create a PR, which is a pull request. Then I approve it. This new branch is merged into the main. And thus, all the changes that were added in the specific branch are incorporated into the main. If they need to be tested on a test server, then I simply merge with the dev branch. And that's how they end up on the test server. This is the sequence we will follow in this course. We'll start with the header, as I mentioned. Therefore, we will create a separate branch for ourselves. Let's name it. Simply switch to the header block. And now we are in a separate branch and can start adding changes. We will primarily work in the company directory, in the GameStop folder, since we need to first do basic things like loading fonts, defining brand colors, and setting variables for colors. And only then will we proceed to develop the block in the plugin folder. I have a course on full site editing development, themes, and Gutenberg block development. Be sure to check it out if you are a complete beginner and don't understand what this structure is, what the hierarchy is. If you have experience in developing classic themes, then you remember at the root. In the template, there were usually PHP files, and each PHP file was responsible for a specific page. In full site editing themes, in block themes, there is a similar system. The only difference is that there is no PHP anymore, everything is in HTML, and everything has been moved to templates. The hierarchy and file naming have remained the same. That is, before we had single.php, which was responsible for an open post, archive.php for the archive page. Now they remain, but now with the HTML extension, NACO, but they are responsible for the same functionality, and before they had PHP, now it's only HTML with special comments. That is the syntax. For Gutenberg, everything we see here are individual blocks in Gutenberg, and for the theme, it's HTML. And in such attributes, in the comments, the settings, and parameters for the blocks themselves are specified. By default, this template has a number of files that are responsible for specific pages. If we, for example, register some post type like cars, then for it, the single template. If we want a personal template, it will be singlecar.html. And in it, we will specify the corresponding blocks that we need. We will be doing this repeatedly. In this course, you will study this structure very well. Remember it, don't worry. That is, everything that used to be in classic PHP themes regarding the hierarchy of these template files, in principle, it has remained the same, just moved to templates. Right here. And now it's in HTML. Well, of course, the body of the files themselves is different, but the very idea that 404 is responsible for the 404 page remains, and so on, by analogy. Next, we of course still have functions.php. This is the main file that helps add some personal PHP code for the template and creates a link with WordPress core. That is our window into the possibilities of PHP and the WordPress core. We will use it also repeatedly in this course. Next, what else important is left? Of course, the style CSS, which contains meta comments. They ensure that WordPress understands that this is a template. Next, fem.json. This is the most important configuration file in WordPress for block themes, since data and settings for block themes are set in JSON format, and they are set in this field. And another point, guys, usually everything we write here, for example, in the Mason or these templates, cannot be edited, as was done before in classic themes. That is, they can, of course, be edited. We will edit them, but the changes themselves on the site are not accepted automatically. That is, at the upload stage of this template and its activation, it reads all the information and uses it. If I change some template, for example, the header or 404, it will not see these changes. More precisely, it will see them in the admin panel and will inform me about it, but it will not apply them on the actual site. On the actual site, it will use the old version of this template. I will demonstrate this to you clearly when we work with it. Next, parts. Also a WordPress option where we can separate into individual parts. Here, as an example, the site's header and footer are separated as parts. Pattern is also an option of block themes, which we will also use, so we can combine the various blocks into patterns and use them. We will also be doing this in the course. Next, assets directory, intended for storing some images with CSS files, storing files. We will put them there. We will create a structure. So in the images, by default, there are images from the generator, which we don't need. Therefore, I delete them. But we will have some additional directories. It will be next, what else about the structure? The index.php is an empty file. It contains nothing. Remember, I told you that in WordPress, every directory must necessarily have one, an index.php file. Empty from a security standpoint, and here it is also present in the template. License.txt, readme.txt, and screenshot PNG. They don't really concern us. They don't affect the template's functionality in any way. The very first thing I do during development is connecting fonts and variables to create. Let's see what fonts we have for headers, Urbanist, and for content, also Urbanist. So we use one font for the entire site overall, according to the variables, ending according to the variables. We have a large list nationalité, and we have two versions, light and dark, but we won't specifically define all the variables. As development progresses, because some might not be used in the project, let's then create files for CSS and JS. So in CSS, we create our personal file. Let's name it GameStore.css. And look, in JS, we also create GameStore.fame related.js. In this JS file, we will only add code that pertains to the global theme. And in this CSS, we will also add CSS code that relates globally to the template. Or all local CSS and JS that pertains specifically to blocks will be added directly in the plugin, specifically in the blocks themselves. But we need these files to set some global things. Next, we need to connect them, so we move to functions. I don't like having too many comments in PHP files, so I always remove them. We have a function and a hook that connects the main style file. The generator added some styles in it. See, but I won't write my styles in this file. I will remove this from here and place it in GameStore. Moreover, in GameStore, we will need to add reset CSS here. Every developer has their own piece of CSS code that they use during layout to reset browser styles by default. And I will also insert my piece of CSS code here, which will reset all default styles. But that will be later. For this reason, we don't specifically need to use WP enqueue style here to load this mine CSS. We will use it only for theme initialization. It's not necessary to load it for styles in principle. Therefore, I can remove it from here. But instead, I will use GameStore General. I'm kind of creating a new CSS. Next, I will specify its path. I use git template directory, URL to the file, assets.css, and the file is called jnagamestore.css. Everything else remains as default. In addition to this CSS file, we need to load this newly created, just created JS file. We use the function enqueue script. So we will name it Game Store. These will be filled automatically. Game Store related. So the path for it will be get template directory URL, assets.js game store, all related JS. Dependencies are an empty array. We are not loading any jQuery on the front end. We won't be using its version. Let's add it just like here. So this line simply adds the template version. That is, every time we edit the template, we change this version. So at the moment, let it be. And each time we update, we will change this version. And consequently, even if the site uses Cloudflare, this value will constantly be added to the link. And if we change it, a fresh version will be loaded. Therefore, I recommend you add such a line. Well, we leave the parameter true. Let's pull it into one line here. I prefer a more compact writing style like this. In principle, we have connected one personal CSS and one personal JS file to these dolls. Next, we need to connect Urbanist font from Google Fonts. There are many different ways. You can download this font, connect it via CSS, connect it via a JSON file, or connect it as a dynamic font through PHP. And in this course, I will demonstrate how I dynamically connect them through PHP. Essentially, I will need a similar hook here that will help me connect this font. For the hook, I need a function, so I will name it Game Store, Google Fonts. In the utility of this function, we need to generate a link to this font. Let's first take a look at Google Fonts. This is the font we are going to connect. And we are interested in generating similar code for WordPress. We will have a certain font variable, URL. It will be empty for now. Next, we will have the name of this font, or simply font. Let's not complicate. Its name, Urbanist. Next, we will have some extra. So this is the additional part. So here it's not the robot. This is what we need. Two fonts, just like I have in Google. This line will load the variations. Italic font from thin to super bold. And the second point is that we probably don't need them. We only need certain things from all of these. So we probably won't connect them in the same way. We will connect 400. Yes, this is the region. We will also connect 500 and 700. Let's probably take a look at the layout. So 700 definitely, about 500, I'm not sure, 400 and 700 are used everywhere. $500 is not used in our project, so we can confidently only connect each 400 and 700. like this. That is, we've already written it manually. And talik, I'm not sure if we use it anywhere. I think we use it somewhere, so we'll keep talik as well. The next thing we need is to write this kind of structure. Great, let's use autocomplete. Next, we will construct the body dynamically. So here we have a typo in family, meaning the font concatenation colon and the second variable. So I was doing nothing other than this combination. You see, that is dynamically creating it. Then the next parameter, subset. Meetings display parameter. So that is, I have already added this parameter to the dynamic link. Personally, one could simply add this link to the header, but in WordPress, this is done in this way, and our final link will be the following with query args and a link to CSS. The only thing is we don't use HTTP here. We use it just like this, and CSS provided it. Wonderful. We return the link that we generated to the font URL. Next, we need a cube to load it similarly to this loading. That is, we will use VPN, Cuscrates, and VPN Crystal, because that's the only way to load an asset in WordPress. Inserting a direct link is incorrect. It needs to be done through WordPress's own handler. For example, when we load JavaScript libraries like jQuery, but Jack and Ryan are in the box, well, as an example I'm giving, yes, it has this sweet jQuery, and WordPress, if it sees that jQuery is being connected in the theme, then in one plugin, in the second, in the third, it loads it only once, and it performs this check using this slug, and the same goes for CSS. For some libraries, slugs are set globally. If it's a library like Swiper, for example, it's set here without a prefix, without anything. Just Swiper and WordPress already sees it, loads it only once, not twice, the same thing, no conflicts arise. That's the first story. The second story, when we connect through these functions, WordPress checks the code there, performs some additional checks for this reason. And for Google, I recommend this particular method of loading. 2. Call the function. I will need another function. Let's call it function. Game Store, Google Font Script. And we will use the VPN function at 100D. Let's do autocomplete, which is exactly what we need. So we set the thread ID, we set this function of ours here in this function. So an empty array, let's set the version, not well, but we'll set 1.0.2. And this function of ours returns a link. We just created it here. We dynamically get it from query args. So this query arg is needed. We create this very dynamic hook, which comes to us here, and with the help of addiction, we directly load it onto the script, as you can see here. This created function for the given hook. This approach should be used for loading Google fonts. Now let's open a page in the browser and see if all our assets that we connected are loading. Now, don't forget to enable Docker. I have it enabled before the start of this lesson, so I go to localhost on port 8000 and see a blank page, which means something is written incorrectly. Let's figure it out. First, let's make sure that the error occurred. Because of our code, I will comment it out and refresh, because I hadn't visited the site before the lesson. Yes, the error is due to our code. Let's uncomment it back. Now let's determine if the error is due to a specific connection. Let's comment out the phone connection. The site is loading. Let's see what's loading here. Maybe not like this, but like this. Let's first find the CSS, or can just file. So the Game Store General CSS is connected. Here is this file. So the CSS is perfectly connected. In the footer, we look for Game Store related. Here it is, related. And Jake with an empty file is also connected, meaning the first cube is written correctly. It works successfully. This cube is written incorrectly. Most likely there's a typo somewhere, and it's generating an error. So we'll carefully check it now. Here's the error on the stove. I'm watching closely. It's shouting right here and I can't see it. This is an array and it should be a key. Of course, in quotes. Let's take a look now. Now you see everything loads wonderfully. No more issues. There was just a 500 error. We didn't see it internally because a function was called in the hook. So there's a 404 error. The favicon isn't loading, but we're not concerned with it right now. It doesn't relate to our code. What's important is our hooks are now working. Let's take another look at the source code and focus on the loading of Google fonts. We type Google, and here is our CSS hook for loading our specific font, and it is generated dynamically. If I click on it, I see all the fonts that I have set and requested. In this way, we have connected in this lesson the files we will work with in the future. This lesson ends here, and in the next lesson, we will move on to building the header itself.